Africa is watching Nigeria today, not out of curiosity, out of concern. The life sentence given to Nnamdi Kanu is not just about one man, one court, or one country. It is about something much deeper that many on this continent still refuse to confront. When political questions are answered only with prisons and verdicts, the problem does not disappear, it transforms. I have said this before, and I will say it again. Africa cannot build unity by silencing unresolved histories. Every time a voice rises demanding identity, dignity, or recognition, it is a signal, not of terrorism alone, but of wounds that were never healed. What we are seeing today is not the end of a movement. It is a moment that forces Africa to look in the mirror. From the Sahel to West Africa, from old colonial borders to modern courtrooms, the same pattern repeats. Force replaces dialogue. Punishment replaces truth. This is why Africa is watching. And this is why my warning matters now more than ever. Because how Africa handles moments like this will decide whether our future is built on stability or endless cycles of unrest. I speak today not as a judge and not as a commentator looking for attention. I speak as an African leader who has watched our continent repeat the same mistakes for generations. When a life sentence is handed down in a politically charged case, the question is never only about the law, it is about the message it sends to millions who are already listening, already questioning, already restless. Africa is young, Africa is conscious, and Africa is no longer silent. Across our continent, many nations are built on borders drawn without consent. Communities were divided, identities were buried, and grievances were postponed in the name of stability. For decades, we were told that time alone would heal these wounds. It did not. Time only covered them. Today, when those buried questions resurface, states often respond with force before understanding. Courts become the final answer instead of the beginning of dialogue. Security replaces politics, control replaces trust. I have learned something in Burkina Faso through struggle and sacrifice. You cannot defeat an idea by imprisoning a man. You can only delay the moment when the idea returns stronger, angrier, and less patient. Real stability is not built through fear. It is built through legitimacy. This is not a defense of any individual or any movement. Africa must protect its citizens from violence. No state can allow chaos, but order without justice is fragile. Peace without inclusion is temporary. When people feel unheard for too long, they search for voices that speak loudly. When institutions fail to represent them, symbols take their place. This is how figures rise, not because they are perfect, but because a vacuum existed. Africa stands at a crossroads. One path continues the inherited system where power speaks and citizens listen. The other path demands courage. It demands dialogue, reform, and the humility to admit that not every challenge is a security threat. The choice we make today will echo far beyond one country. It will shape how the next generation believes in Africa or turns away from it. I want to be very clear about something Africa often avoids saying out loud. Many of our political crises are not new problems. They are old questions that were never answered honestly. When colonial rule ended, flags were changed, but foundations were not rebuilt. Borders remained, power structures remained, legal systems remained. What changed was who sat at the top, not how the system treated the people beneath it. In many countries, communities were told to forget their past in the name of national unity. Forget the wars, forget the promises, forget the pain. We were taught that silence was patriotism, but silence does not erase memory, it only pushes it deeper. I have seen this pattern across Africa. When identity is ignored, it does not disappear, it hardens. When grievances are dismissed, they do not fade, they organize. And when peaceful channels feel blocked, frustration looks for other exits. This is where states make a dangerous mistake. Instead of asking why anger exists, they focus only on how loudly it is expressed. Instead of fixing representation, they expand surveillance. Instead of reform, they reach for force. We must understand this truth. Security laws cannot replace political solutions. Courts cannot heal historical wounds. Armored vehicles cannot build belonging. In Burkina Faso, we have learned that legitimacy matters more than intimidation. A government that listens does not fear questions. A state that belongs to its people does not panic when challenged. Strength is not proven by how hard you strike, but by how confidently you engage. Africa's youth are watching closely. They are educated, they are connected, they compare their reality with the promises they were given. When the gap becomes too wide, explanations stop working. This is why cases like this resonate far beyond one courtroom. They remind Africans everywhere of unresolved chapters in their own countries. They awaken memories that were never properly addressed. If Africa wants lasting stability, we must confront our past with honesty. We must reform systems that were designed to control, not serve. And we must accept that unity cannot be enforced. It must be built. Ignoring this lesson only guarantees that history will knock again, and next time it may not ask politely. Leadership in Africa today is being tested in ways our predecessors never faced. The old methods no longer work, yet many still rely on them because they feel familiar. It is easy to govern through force. It is easy to declare threats and respond with laws, uniforms, and prisons. That approach creates the appearance of control. But appearances are not stability, they are delay. True leadership is harder. It requires listening when it would be simpler to silence. It requires reform when punishment feels faster. And it requires courage to admit that the system itself may be part of the problem. I did not come to power in Burkina Faso because the system was functioning. I came to power because people had lost faith in institutions that no longer protected them or represented them. That loss of trust is the most dangerous force in any nation. When citizens stop believing in justice, they stop believing in the state. When they stop believing in the state, no amount of force can restore legitimacy. You can control territory, but you cannot control belief. This is where leadership must choose. Either we govern through fear and accept endless resistance, or we govern through legitimacy and build lasting peace. There is no middle ground. I say this with respect for sovereignty. Every nation must handle its own affairs. But Africa cannot afford to ignore patterns that repeat across borders. When political crises are treated only as security problems, instability multiplies. When leadership becomes reactive instead of visionary, nations drift. Power must be disciplined, authority must be restrained by accountability, and justice must be seen, not just enforced. Africa does not lack strong people. It lacks systems that allow strong people to trust their future within the state. Until that changes, leaders will continue facing challenges that courts alone cannot solve. This moment is not about one verdict. It is about whether African leadership evolves or remains trapped in inherited habits. History will not remember how many laws we passed. It will remember whether we understood the moment we were given. I know who is watching this moment most closely. It is not governments. It is not institutions. It is Africa's youth and our brothers and sisters across the diaspora. You are informed. You are connected. You do not accept simple explanations anymore. When you see courtrooms, sentences, and state power collide with political identity, you ask deeper questions, and you are right to do so. I want you to understand something clearly. Your anger is not the problem. Your questions are not the threat. What becomes dangerous is when a system leaves no space for expression, no path for participation, and no hope for reform. Africa does not belong to a generation that inherited power decades ago. It belongs to those who will live with the consequences of today's decisions. That is why your voice matters, even when it makes leaders uncomfortable. But I also say this with responsibility. Change that is driven only by emotion will always be outmaneuvered by systems built on patience. Transformation requires discipline, strategy, and clarity. It requires knowing what you are building, not just what you are rejecting. I do not ask Africa's youth to be silent. I ask you to be deliberate. Organize ideas, not just outrage. Demand reform, not just reaction. Hold leaders accountable, but do not lose sight of the future you want to inherit. To the diaspora, your role is just as important. You carry Africa's story beyond its borders. Speak with honesty. Resist simplification. Do not reduce complex struggles to slogans. Africa's realities deserve depth, not noise. Moments like this can divide or awaken. They can radicalize or mature a movement. The difference lies in leadership, patience, and purpose. Africa's future will not be shaped only by those in office. It will be shaped by those who refuse to disengage, who think critically, and who insist that dignity and justice are not negotiable. Every serious moment carries a lesson. The danger is not that we fail to see it, but that we choose to ignore it. What Africa is witnessing now is not isolated. It is connected to a larger pattern that has shaped our politics for decades. When systems feel distant from the people, tension grows. When leaders rely on force instead of reform, pressure builds. And when pressure is ignored, it eventually breaks something. I have seen how quickly stability can become fragile. One decision, one moment, can either calm a nation or deepen mistrust. This is why leadership must think beyond the present. The easiest response is rarely the wisest one. Africa does not suffer from a lack of laws. It suffers from a lack of confidence in those laws. People obey rules when they believe the system belongs to them. When they do not, enforcement becomes endless. and exhausting. There is also a warning here for governments who believe time is on their side. Time does not erase resentment, it organizes it. Silence does not mean acceptance, it often means preparation. I am not calling for disorder. I am not calling for defiance. I am calling for intelligence. Real intelligence in governance is the ability to see consequences before they arrive. It is the discipline to choose dialogue when confrontation feels tempting. Africa's future cannot be secured by repeating inherited habits. The world has changed. Our people have changed. Expectations have changed. Leadership that does not evolve will find itself permanently reacting instead of shaping. This moment challenges every African state to ask a hard question. Are we governing to control the present or to secure the future? Those two goals are not always aligned. History is patient, but it is honest. It records patterns, not excuses. And it remembers which leaders understood their moment and which ones misunderstood their power. Africa still has a choice. The warning is clear. Whether we listen or not will define the next chapter of our continent. Africa's story is not finished. What we are witnessing today is only one chapter in a much longer journey. Moments like this force us to pause and reflect. They remind us that power is temporary, but consequences are not. Decisions made in courtrooms, offices, and security meetings travel far beyond their original intent. They settle into memory, they shape belief, they influence how generations understand justice and belonging. I do not speak with anger, I speak with responsibility. Africa cannot afford endless cycles of tension followed by silence, only to repeat the same pattern again. Stability built without trust will always be fragile. Unity imposed without inclusion will never last. The future of this continent will not be determined by how strongly we enforce authority, but by how wisely we exercise it. Leadership must evolve from control to confidence, from reaction to vision, from inherited systems to African solutions. Our people are not asking for chaos, they are asking for dignity, they are asking to be heard, and when people feel heard, they defend their nations rather than resist them. Africa stands at a crossroads, not because of one verdict, but because of what it reveals about how we govern ourselves. The path forward is still open. Dialogue is still possible. Reform is still achievable. But time matters. What we choose now will shape whether Africa's next chapter is written in stability and trust or in repetition and regret.